I'm really grateful there are some NASA scientists. The first part of this I'm going to read because it's sort of news information, and it's a news information from 1 week, okay? And I just called 4 things so we can run the video. So, NASA's latest carbon dioxide mapping satellite has detected a dramatic spike in the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, measuring the largest annual increase Earth has seen in at least 2,000 years. The cause? Overheating of 3 major tropical forest regions across the globe. NASA's orbiting carbon observatory is one of several satellites that collect greenhouse gas emissions data to uncover how much, or in this case, how little, carbon dioxide was absorbed out of the atmosphere by Earth's tropical forests. In both 2015, 2016, NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration measured the largest annual increases in atmospheric carbon dioxide in at least 2,000 years. Using this data, in total, the 3 tropical land regions released at least 2.5 gigatons more of carbon into the atmosphere than they did in 2011, or about a 50% increase. And what's going on now is as plants experience warmer, drier conditions, they're more likely to dry out and rot, producing more CO2 instead of removing it from the atmosphere like healthy plants do. And without enough plants to perform photosynthesis and filter our CO2 out of the air, the tropical forests will not be able to soak up as much of the greenhouse gas emissions that are increasing global temperatures across the planet. The Amazon basin, which is kind of my particular interest, is experienced the most severe drought in 30 years. So there's the punchline at the beginning of the show, and I hope I can lighten it up a little bit. And I think most of you are aware of this information, and you're probably all interested in this subject. But the lead news item of the week was Scott Pruitt, Environmental Protection Agency, is beefing up security measures surrounding Administrator Scott Pruitt to an unprecedented level. CNN has learned as members of Congress are asking if the costs are a potential waste or abuse of taxpayer dollars. The incoming agents will grow the team that works in shifts to provide him around-the-clock protection, something unheard of for Pruitt's predecessors. Salaries alone for the full team will cost at least $2 million per year. The spending increase comes as the Trump administration has laid out plans to cut the agency's budget by 30%, including major cuts to the agency's enforcement work, staffing, as well as the elimination of some programs. And from Monday, from Providence, Rhode Island, the Environmental Protection Agency kept 3 scientists from appearing at a Monday event about a report that deals in part with climate change. EPA is now actively censoring science. And finally, Tuesday, from the New York Times, fires, floods, hurricanes are already costing the federal government tens of billions of dollars a year, and climate change will drive those costs ever higher in coming years, a new federal study warrants. These are all government statistics, by the way. The report by the Government Accountability Office, Congress's auditing arm, urges the Trump administration to take climate risk seriously and begin formulating a response. Okay, there's a sad irony here is that the government is reducing the needs for this research, at the time of a crisis and emergency. And sadly, our President and Republican Party know all too well the value of the scientific method. They choose to ignore the safety of our Earth for the personal gain of a tax cut that primarily favors the 1%. In the most cynical move of all, they've exploited the anger of the disenfranchised for the gain of a wealthy minority. So we're in the middle of a global crisis, which we all know, and right now we're in the middle of an American political crisis. And this is kind of the start of the story of how I got here and got from 2005 to 2017. It's a story I call The Health of the Planet, which is the title of the exhibition next door. And this is what we're losing. This is the Mata Atlantica, Brazil's Atlantic rainforest, a lot of the flora in these overheating Brazilian rainforest and the main Amazon. There's drought across the country, extended dry seasons in the Chapada Diamantina in Bahia, and there is a subsequent water runoff that the land can no longer absorb by the parched land. So I was interested in science technology for a long time, and I started using things like electron microscopes. This is a little bit of a self-portrait vanitas. It's one of my blood cells with an X-ray of flower. This was and a candle, which was a vanitas symbol for the ephemeral nature of reality. And it's something that was kind of a Dutch Flemish painting style that talked about, there was a morality play, which is basically, you better be good because Santa Claus is coming to town. And I started to use X-rays and medical technology to sort of look around the world around me, and I came to the conclusion that I could actually use these tools, maybe like Andy's doing as well, to kind of gain insight into the natural world. So my curiosity started taking a trip to Brazil in 2005, and I was invited to be an exhibition there, and I was fortunate enough to travel. I saw this amazing fruit, which I'd never seen before. It's called a jackfruit or a jaca, and they hang in trees really tall, and if they would fall on top of you, they'd definitely knock you out. And I thought, like, what is inside this thing? And I decided to take one of the jacas to a hospital, put it in an MRI machine, and kind of see what it looked like. And lo and behold, I got this image of what I thought was a set of human lungs. So it started this whole idea, if the Amazon are the lungs of the planet, I could metaphorically X-ray the flora and fauna of Brazil, and in that way give the Earth a medical checkup. So that's the kind of start of this project called Health of the Planet. In Brazil, the greatest number of animals are in the Amazon, and you have to get a radiologist and convince someone to take these X-rays. That's another story. That's a whole other Dazer presentation. But I found the greatest collection of animals in Belém, which is a town which is at the mouth. It's the northernmost town of any size of the Amazon River. And I was automatically interested in, there was a zoo, a fisheries, an aviary, illegal poaching labs that I went to, which I'll maybe talk about briefly. But the interesting, I would go and I would hang out with the animals and meet them. Sloths are amazing animals. And I wanted to X-ray a sloth. And the thing about the sloth is, this is called sloth pieta. The sloths are the canary in the coal mine for Brazil because they live in the canopy. So their ability to survive is their ability to move freely through the canopy. So as soon as you start reducing the canopy, you've obviously limited their ability to move around freely. And when they move across, so the canopy is being cut down for forage, for soy, for animals, and they found out that they have incredibly sensitive lungs. They're very sensitive to pollution. So any air pollution is hurting their respiratory system. So when you cut down the canopy and reduce them to an island, they've got to, once they've used up that area, they've got to crawl across very slowly, and they are very vulnerable to predators. So the sloth is now an endangered species, a couple of varieties of sloth in Brazil, and it was something that I thought was a great kind of metaphor for what's going on in Brazil, and it's a Catholic country, so I thought the Pieta was an interesting thing. So when I was in the Amazon, these are actually images. One day we were doing tortoises one day. Every night I had this hospital, and they would bring animals into the hospital, and they gave me a bunch of turtles in a box, and these turtles were actually had eggs. And this is a freshwater stingray from the Amazon River that I got by accident. I got lucky. I went to a legal poaching lab that the curator of the museum took me to, and they had about, maybe 500 rays that they were selling to China and to the U.S. It's pretty sad. Of course, I wanted one. I wanted to X-ray one, but they weren't going to give up their bounty. But while I was there for the week, one of them died, and they came in and they brought it. So here's the X-ray of that particular specimen. This is these were all organized as digital print editions, and this is kind of the translation in terms of my process when I go from an X-ray to a painting, for example. And you'll notice that there's some wires there, and I think somebody mentioned JD or something, the favela. So this is the conversation. There's these resources and there's the need for the resources. And the need for the resources is very chaotic and very unorganized. And in order to get into the favela, so these are from the favela in Rio, you have to get permission from the drug dealers, at least when I was there, to go in. You have to have a bodyguard. They tell you what you can shoot and where you can go. And the reason why I really wanted to do this and get these photographs, because I felt like they really expressed sort of like the human situation where the need is there, and how in the world and a population explosion to regulate this. It maybe asks more questions than it answers, but that was the reason to kind of get into the favela and look at both, the natural resources in the jungle and the use of the resources by the population. So one of the fortunate things I've been able to do is work with other scientists. This is working with Woods Hole, and these are satellite remote sensing images of land clearing. So that white line that you see going across the bottom of the painting kind of diagonally, that's a road. And then those spikes off the road are where they go in and log, and then they log out in a straight line and then come back in and then just do parallel lines of logging to bring the resources to the main road. And that pattern is called a fishbone pattern. And there's something very efficient about piranhas. And piranhas clean the river, and they have this incredible function that makes a very dynamic part of a fluid system with making sure that the river is healthy enough for other animals to be in the river. And so I started to use these fishbone patterns. Those are piranhas actually I had to order from the fish market in Belém. I had a fisherman go. They're not good to eat. So I had ordered them special and brought them in. And then I started thinking about using these fishbone patterns and sort of including in what I thought was a fluid dynamic system between resources and need. So the X-rays, this is an orchid turned on. Well, there's two orchids actually. The one turned on its side. They're really hard to X-ray. And what I did one day was I knew I could do this. I sprayed them with barium. And the barium are the bubbles. So I took like a mister and sprayed them. And that was the only way we could image them because the leaves were so fragile. We just didn't have the technology in the hospital to do that. And finally, one night, nothing was working, and I said, it was midnight, and everyone had to go home. So I said, let's just throw everything down, and this is what I got. This was a live bird, by the way, and also none of the animals were hurt. I worked with animal handlers. This was from an aviary in Belém, and I was looking to do a bird, and they were looking for someone that would X-ray a bird because they were having a lot of bone breakage, and they wanted to know what was going on with the bones if they were too thin, and so they brought one in. We taped it down with tape on an X-ray plate, and this is the result. Animals released unharmed. So the other thing that was interesting for me was trying to sort of expand the audience for where you can get this, to get out of the white box, to get out of the art gallery, to also really reference, the environment that the animals come from. In this place, they're obviously coming from the river, and surfing is really big in Brazil. They have thousands of miles of beaches, and this was sort of my idea called School of Piranha. So with these shapes, so this is a simplified aerial satellite map of the Amazon River basin, obviously one small section. But what I really like to do and understand, besides this dialogue between consumption and resources, I also like this idea between macro and micro. So it let me kind of zone in and get like the long view and the inside view and see that there's an incredible relationship between the two of these things. So how these things get transferred onto painting. So this is another, right, so now you can see the white is way more complex and rich. They've cleared a lot more land. And what I would do is simplify these things and then silkscreen. I think one of these paintings might be in the show. something similar to this at any rate, and silkscreen those onto the canvas. In this case, you've got combining the resources, the flora, and then the deforestation, the purple fishbone satellite map with the sort of lime green and white larger deforestation. And maybe this is kind of the grand finale in terms of the different kinds of patterns all thrown together into one piece. This is called the Archaeology of Knowledge, and it's named after a book by Michel Foucault. I tend to name my paintings after other authors. And Foucault is talking a lot about the role of science and the kind of paradigm shifts that take place with the notion of invention and scientific progress. This one is also named after a book. It's called Field Notes. It's by one of my favorite writers besides Carl Safina. It's a woman named Elizabeth Colbert who writes for The New Yorker. And she wrote a book called Field Notes. And right now I'm reading, sadly, another sad moment, a book called The Sixth Extinction, which I really recommend. All these books are just like tear you up. And I also recommend Carl Safina. This is finally the last painting. It's in the show. It clearly shows a kind of cleaner relationship. I'm trying to get these kind of galactic movements of nature along with the deforestation and the X-ray of the plants above. So someone talked earlier about the trophy, and we didn't actually. This was a live juvenile alligator, which was sedated by the zoo, but we didn't injure the animal supposedly. And it was a way to sort of get that idea of the stuffed alligator on the wall. You go hunting, well, you don't really have to kill the animal. And I thought it would be great to have this idea of an echo trophy. So this was sort of my concept. And finally, this live python was the vehicle for investigating the micro experience. And I decided to put out a skateboard, and the idea that you would make the same movement with your feet and snake around on your skateboard and have a samba with science. Thank you.